I am recording.
And we are live. You're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
I'm Nathan.
Andrew.
And today we have, I forgot, we have more people here. And we have another very special episode. We have the 1990 movie, The Hunt for Red October, which is 20 years after our previous movie. Which is kind
of weird. It's kind of strange. And this movie's 30-some years old, so it's like, wow, we're time traveling at this point.
It came out March 2nd, 1990. Do you have a history of the movie? Did we go see this in theater? I don't remember seeing it in theaters or anything. But...
I think me and Dad did.
Okay.
Because I was a Tom Clancy nerd like before this movie came out. Like this was my thing. I mean, I've talked about my. I'm gonna a lot of talk during this episode is gonna cross-pollinate between the book and the movie. Sorry, I know this is supposed to be movie focused, but I can't do the movie without the book.
No. Anytime we come across a movie that's based on a book, we kind of like try to do all-encompassing stuff. So I didn't reread the book, but I've read the book as before. So
and Tom Clancy always had a special place in my heart as just one of those world-class storyteller guys that made everyone around him feel smarter than they actually were. And that's a good feeling, you know. It makes you feel like I'm in the action here. I know what all this means. So.
I don't know. It's kind of like how the mythos of Tom Clancy, because like everybody would say like, oh, he was also CIA analyst, but wasn't he just like an insurance guy who just had like Navy friends and stuff like that and did a lot of research?
He is someone who wanted to be in the military, but he had horrendous eyesight. And they just he was just kept out of service. So this was like, he became like an actuary insurance analyst guy, and he turned that knowledge and research purely into like history research, naval research, warfare research. And he was also a great storyteller, and he merged those three loves into this amazing fiction. Because this book, the book, The Hunt for Red October, was published through a technical publishing company that just published like articles like Tom Clancy. Hold on, what was it called? The Navy Press or something? Let me look real quick.
That makes it, because that's probably the same thing that did Pentagon Wars or something.
Yeah, Naval Institute Press was who published it initially, and his thing before this was he wrote a technical article about the MX missile and its implementation and kind of like how it would fit into our strategic nuclear umbrella or whatever. And then the Naval Press decided, hey, let's do fiction, because that's like a kind of an up and coming thing, but let's do technical fiction because this might be a genre that people like. And so Tom Clancy submitted this novel, and he sold it to him for the whopping sum of $5,000, which they also did a lot of editing on it, and then published the original Hunt for Red October, the novel that everyone's read. I have like the special edition where they put in all the technical stuff, which was actually kind of cool if you like that. But yeah, so Tom Clancy was a singular kind of genius. There's other people that do that, what they call techno thriller genres, but his always had like the best panache and the best icing on it and a sheen of legitimacy, because he became so popular. He started hanging out with admirable admirals. Yes, he started hanging out with admirals and Pentagon people and George H.W. Bush and a lot of people. So it's like, it was always Tom Clancy was like, his name became something he could trademark and live off.
And towards the end of life, he was hanging out with Carrie Fisher and Kevin Smith.
Yeah, it got strange. It's the hero's journey is sometimes unusual. It definitely got strange towards the end.
Andrew, do you have a history of this? Because you were saying you started watching this last night. You couldn't get through all of it because the internet was going out, but you said this is the first time you actually watched this movie.
Yeah, I think I've seen like bits and pieces of it on cable.
Do you remember like what you thought it was, like, and never watched it, or just never got around to it?
I mean, it's a solid like espionage movie. I mean, it's part and parcel. What I'd say is like because I've seen Sum of All Fears is probably the only Tom Clancy movie I've seen all the way through before this, and it seems very much in par and tone and course of that movie. Maybe not as actiony because CGI and it takes all place on a sub action stuff, but at the same time, yeah, I'm just happy with the movie. I was kind of disappointed I couldn't finish it, but at the same time, it's like, well, I guess I'll try and finish the last 40 or 45 minutes some other time. But I mean, I liked it. I mean, it thought it aged pretty well. It doesn't necessarily need to be really showy or have a lot of. I mean, it was really star-studded for the time. I don't know what the budget was on that movie.
Oh, it was a big budget movie, but
okay.
30 million production.
Okay. Because I imagine between Tim Curry and Sean Connery and Alec Baldwin, they ate up quite a bit.
But I mean, this is McTiernan coming off of Die Hard, so I think, right?
I believe so. Yeah. Die Hard was 88.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is coming off Die Hard, so yeah. So yeah, obviously directed by John McTiernan, my favorite felon director. I hope he's all your favorite felon director too.
He is my favorite ultimate badass. I'm such a director, I'm just gonna spy on people. I'm gonna surreptitiously monitor their communication so I can shape my message. That is a guy dedicated to his craft. I don't care what anyone says.
Well, no, he's not my favorite felon director. He is my favorite director. He just happens to be a felon as well. So. If you don't know, Andrew, he got caught for spying on producers and stuff. I don't know what technically he went to jail for, but he was spying on producers.
Wiretapping and fraud.
Yeah, okay.
It's illegal to so everyone thinks it's clever, I'm going to put a device on someone's computer and or phone and or listening device in their house, because you can buy that stuff readily until you're that's a felony. You will go to prison for 5 years for doing that. It's a complete invasion of privacy. And if you profit from it, then it's it's a force multiplier. You lose all your money then. So.
But it's fun if you go back and listen to his audio commentaries, because he does them for, I think, almost all of his movies. He does them. And you hear him talk about dealing with producers, and he's just you just got to know how to talk with them and deal with them. And you realize, oh, he knows how to deal with them because he's been spying on them.
It's it's like a poker guy or it's like a guy who's counting cards. It's you just gotta have a feel for where the cards are. It's by cheating. That's how you have a feel for it.
Well, I mean, the human condition is to be uncomfortable with other people's heads because you don't know what's in them. So technically, I wouldn't say he's cheating. He's just coming up with a better way of playing the game.
Well, I mean, what I'd say for about 90% of his filmography, he is correct and made the right decision to do that for his art.
Yeah, the lesson to learn from John McTiernan is not that he was wrong; it was that he got caught.
Well, yeah, I would say the crime of spying on Hollywood producers is not a big crime. I don't think anyone should be really concerned about it. It's not like he was selling a lot of national secrets or anything. He just wanted to not have to deal with bullshit 24/7.
What do you mean, Andrew? They're great people. I'm like at Harvey Weinstein. I mean, the charitable, wonderful human being there. He gave all these women all these jobs.
Hand jobs, boob jobs.
One thing, just one thing.
No, because I mean we were talking.
This podcast. Good night, everyone.
Well, I mean, because we were talking about the pedophile in the movie. I mean, I'm sorry, possible pedophile,
alleged pedophile.
Yeah, alleged pedophile. The principal, the guy played the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and
oh god, I forgot about that. Okay, yeah.
Well, because I was talking about it because I was I thought the
like...
story ended with him going to jail. No, he never went to jail. So it's weird that John McTiernan goes to jail for spying on producers.
Yeah,
but the guy that watches child pornography, no jail time. It's a weird dichotomy.
Yeah, that's not right.
I mean, he also got
speaking in the world of the hypothetical.
Yeah, allegedly.
I don't want to be sued for the $4,000 I have. Don't take it from me.
I think that all happened around the 2000s, and I guess for some reason they're more lenient on that stuff, and he had some status, and so he just happened to get away with it. So, but
that you should never get away with. That's weird.
Yeah.
What was his excuse? He was studying for a role.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't delve into it deeper because you just never want to really know that stuff.
You can't research that stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead and type that into a Google search. Well, you're going to jail.
But I was just researching child pornography, sir. That's all I was doing.
Yeah, you and the guy from the Who. It's like, yeah, this is just for research. It's like, no, it doesn't work. He had hundreds of millions of dollars to defend himself. So it's like, yeah, no, don't do it.
But anyways, John McTiernan is my favorite director because if I was a director, that's who I would. Because he makes ostensibly, is that the right word? Yeah, big dumb action movies, but he layers them to be smart and sensical with the big dumb action. Because when you think of Die Hard, because there's so many clones of Die Hard, then they always get it wrong. Because on the surface, you think Die Hard is a dumb movie, but it's actually smart and laid out very well. But on the surface, it seems dumb. And so that's kind of what John McTiernan does. He takes kind of dumb, trite material, he adds a bit of like kind of realism to it and stakes and humanism, and he makes spectacular action along the way. So
it works. That makes you want to believe it. And in this movie, because I know the book and the movie well, because I've read and seen them both dozens of times, it's like, this is a very dense novel. That they actually tie together in a way that anyone could watch this movie and understand what's going on. I mean, maybe not in the full dimensions, but you could just, in one viewing of this movie, it's like you understand. There's never a point where you're confused as to what is going on or why. Now, if you read the novel, it's like you might not have to do a little research. Like, oh wait, what? This? Like,
she was a 30-page technical manual in between chapters.
Yeah. It's like, it might not be your thing. But for whoever wrote the script, who did do the script, by the way?
It was separate people, Larry Ferguson and Donald Lee Stewart. It's A&D and, so they didn't write it together. They wrote it separately. Larry Ferguson, he did like Highlander and stuff like that.
Yes. Okay.
He also, I believe, he plays Cobb on the Dallas. He's the chief of the boat. So,
interesting. Okay.
McTiernan loves to have writers on set, so that's a way he can get to like rewrites on set is by having them be actors. Because he did the same thing in Predator.
That's smart. That's like 2 for 1. It's like I'm paying you for one thing, but
gotta do 2.
Well, also it's a way to get around like some things where it's like having someone work on set because it's like, we don't want writers on set. It's like, how about if the writer was an actor? Because he did the same thing with Shane Black in Predator. Because Shane Black was like, he was the nerdy guy of the crew that has the MP5. It's
is that the guy telling the jokes all the time?
Yeah.
The joke that made the one guy laugh was like the echo inside his wife's.
Yeah,
inside her sex organs. It's like, they're so big. They're so big. They're so big. I can't say the line, but yeah.
You can on here. I'll just edit it in post on the podcast. But I
mean, it's a great joke. I'm not saying it not because I'm afraid of saying it. It's like you need to hear it in its original form because it's really cool in the way it's done and the way it's delivered and the time in the movie it happens.
But there's a lot of stuff that seems like ad-libbed that was actually just Shane Black on set just feeding people lines. So that's why John McTiernan does that stuff. So, and again, it's a way to circumvent producers because he can just change things on set without their approval.
Once again, fucking with producers. You'll never learn.
Yeah, the more you tell me about this guy, Conlon, the more he might even supplant Ridley Scott as my favorite.
And then the other guy.
No, I like Ridley Scott for all the esoteric bullshit and the egotism. I just love Ridley Scott's ego, if nothing else. That's why he's my favorite director.
Well, I mean, John McTiernan he makes to me what is art, but he doesn't. I think on the whole he doesn't make art, whereas Ridley Scott makes art. So
like picking Ridley Scott as my favorite director, like. That's not like a hard fastball. It's like, oh, well, of course. He's like one of the 10 best directors that's ever lived. It's like saying it's only Stanley Kubrick for me, and I'm an oddball for that, right? You're standing among equals there.
No, Ed Wood's my favorite director, but I just do that for the confrontation and the argument.
You want to fight with people.
And then Donald Lee Stewart was the other writer. He kind of cherry-did the rest of the Clancyverse franchise because he worked on Patriot Games and what was the other one? Clear and Present Danger. So he was like co-writer on those. And of course, this is based on a novel by Tom Clancy. I don't know. I think at this time he kind of had no involvement with this movie other than probably got a bunch of money for it, but it was later on where he really got lucrative with all the rights and stuff.
I think it was pretty much. This was pretty much a what you call an internet print form involvement. It's like you get X amount of money for the rights, and I don't think he got any back end or anything. That was much later. So.
Whereas, like, when you got to Some of All Fears, which is kind of a mediocre movie, but is a great commentary track where Tom Clancy is there, basically discrediting the whole movie.
Yeah, that's bullshit. Just telling the director that to his face. And he's like, yeah, you know that's bullshit, right? Yeah, let me tell you why. It's bullshit. And yeah, that was this is the best. Why I love Tom Clancy is that commentary. Yeah. Everything I love about the guy. I mean, he's never a guy I could be, but it's like, oh, I love guys like this. It's like I am so confident.
But also, it's almost like a film school unto itself, because it's there Tom Clancy saying none of this is realistic at all, and then you think of it in a film direction wise, like, why does a bomb have a timer on it? To display information to the audience very quickly. Yes, Tom. They don't put time clocks on bombs. But Tom, we don't have time to explain that to an audience.
And that's why it's bullshit. There should be, like, what's his name? Who's the actor who played Jack Ryan in that? The famous guy.
Ben Affleck.
Ben
Affleck. Yeah, Ben Affleck should, like, have a 30-minute exposition dialogue about it doesn't have a timer, but this is what it means, and it's they're never going to do that. I mean, some people like me would be like, that was the best acting of his career right there, but other people would be like, this is boring. Is someone going to fart or take their top off? Because I can't listen to this. Pretty length of time.
But yeah. Tom Clancy.
Let's keep moving. We're not even past, like, the credits.
Oh, we haven't started it. But, cinematographer is Jan de Bont, who worked a lot with John McTiernan. He did cinematography with Die Hard, and he does a lot of action stuff. And
isn't Speed what made him famous?
I mean, he also worked with Paul Verhoeven a lot. He didn't do RoboCop because
Paul Verhoeven.
Jan de Bont couldn't work with him on RoboCop because Jan de Bont had already moved over to being in the union for making movies, and he wasn't yet, so he couldn't work on RoboCop with him. But yeah, then Jan de Bont got Jan de Bont did get to move on to direct his own movies, and so his first movie he directed was Speed, and then he did Twister, and I forget what ruined his career, but that was kind of it.
That was director's jail stuff. Yeah.
But those were two wildly successful movies back to back, and then he never did anything after that.
Well, that's the thing with directors. Like, today's hero is tomorrow's zero. It's like, well, you made $300 million like back to back, and I made one bomb. It's like, nope, you're done. You're going to make a tornado movie with Michael Shannon, and if that doesn't work, you're done, and we're going to give you $5 million to make it.
Maybe it's like, has anybody else seen the movie Card Counter?
I've seen that.
Just came out where it's like the guy that worked at Abu Ghraib, and he's just like kind of fucking weird and keeps to himself and just goes to casinos and shit. Where he's kind of like explaining like the background of like the World Poker Tour and like the people that play on it and their sponsors and shit. He's like, look at that guy, he wins like all the fucking time, but he's so far underwater he'll never see the light of day. It's like, maybe it's like that. Just because you made two really good movies doesn't mean
this guy's gonna win $10 million, but he's $50 million in the hole of the law. Yeah, I remember that movie. It was excellent. It's like, oh, that explains that whole universe to me. I used to think because I was a math dummy, it's like, damn, I'm missing out on something not being a professional card player. And then I realized, oh, no, those people's lives suck. They're worth less than you are. It's like, oh, okay, I feel pretty good about myself now.
All right, he did Speed, was a success. Twister, big success. Then he did Speed 2, big flop.
Yep.
Then he did The Haunting, which I think was a mild success. And then he did the second Laura Croft movie, which I think was a bomb, and then that was it. And then he never directed ever again.
The Haunting is not I mean, I know critically no one liked it. I didn't know financially it did. Okay,
I went to the theater to see that with Nathan and Stacy, and I fucking hated that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, is he still alive?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, it doesn't say. Doesn't have a
This
death
is
on
my
here.
wife's thing with movies. Because believe it or not, everyone, I have a wife. I know she's never been on the show, and we've never talked about movies together, but she's always like, yeah, this horror movie looks interesting. And I'm always like, 90% of those suck. And there's a reason why. It's because they're just like, that's what you call trailer bait, honey. It's like the trailer looks cool. They just showed you all the best scenes in the movie. And
Well, I mean, sometimes horror movies, it's about the experience rather than the actual technical quality and craft of the movie. So,
Yeah.
well, I mean, she watches Halloween like 50 times a year. And she's like, I don't know why I like this movie so much. It's like, because it's well written and directed, and it's cool, and everything works in it. Everything that should work in a horror movie is present in John Carpenter's original Halloween. That's it. That's all you can say about it. That's why you watch it 50 times a year. Why do I watch Aliens like 12 times a year? It's because it works. Everything in it works, and everything else tries to copy it and fails. And and then I get into like Russian cinema, and it's like, hey, you want to watch this with me? No, Nathan, I don't. This is like reading movie. Why are we doing reading movie? It's like,
of course, the cast is Sean Connery, Alec Baldwin, Scott Glenn, and a bunch of others we'll get to. So, so we have Act 1. We start. There's like a green monotone computer map.
This is what I call Amiga Vision. For Amiga computers, in case any of you.
Yeah, I never used one. I remember we had like an Apple IIe, I think it is, that always had the green screen. So it's kind of like that. We get
IIe, Apple IIc. We were the only kids that had computers when I was like young. It's like Murphys have a computer at their house, and Dad was spending as much for those computers as we spend for computers now.
Yeah, they were like.
No, I mean the same money.
No, they were $2,000 back then.
Yeah, Dad was like, "You gotta have one," and I would bring printed off stuff to school, and I'd be like, "This doesn't count. What is this?" It's like, "No, I did this on the computer. I read the book and typed it in. You can't do this, Nathan." Like Dad had to call the school and be like, "No, he did the work," because they thought, like, I don't know what they thought, like somebody else did it or it wasn't legitimate. And that was the kind of printing where you had the paper had the holes in it.
Yeah, dot matrix. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would advance the thing, and you had to peel that off, and I would turn that in. It was like double spaced, and it was like, "This is a book report." No, Nathan, you can't do this. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not like the internet existed like it does now, where you can just find a copy of it or get ChatGPT.
Yeah, there was no internet here. We were just...
You're gonna get somebody else.
No, we want this written in incomprehensible cursive.
I blame Hollywood because they just made the computers seem like they could do homework for people, so they just thought computers are doing that shit.
Well, you got to remember, like when I was a kid, like I had dyslexia or something was wrong. There's a reason I'm the person I am today, and it was some kind of learning disabilities or whatever. But it's like, oh, if it came to computers and I could type it in, I would suddenly like, oh, I'm reading Moby Dick because I can do this cool computer thing where I can type it in. It's not that I was cheating or getting it off the internet or anything. And yeah, nobody accepted it.
We get titles that says, in November of 1984, shortly before Gorbachev came to power, a Typhoon-class Soviet sub surfaced just south of the Grand Banks. And it then sank in deep water, apparently suffering a radiation problem. Unconfirmed reports indicated some of the crew were rescued, but according to repeated statements by both Soviet and American governments, nothing of what you're about to see ever happened. So I forgot this is supposed to take place in 1984.
Yeah. This was right at the height of the late Cold War.
But
like the day after Cold War.
Well, because like it takes place, it got released in the 90s. To me, and like all the technology in this movie is pretty advanced for even for it's supposed to be 1984. I thought it was just the 90s whenever I watched this movie.
No, 1984.
Oh yeah, I guess we never asked. Do you remember the hype for this movie? Like how it was like kind of put out there? Because like you'd have to probably have like adverts in like '89 or something, right?
I do remember some trailers.
Okay.
And the trailers were basically like the cool intro scene where Ramius and Sam Neill were talking on the deck, and it would switch it would like the title card would come up like The Hunt for Red October in Russian.
Yeah.
And then it would swing through, and it would be the people singing the Russian national anthem. And like I remember those trailers. And it was like a super submarine, and you know.
Also, the poster's really cool. It's just like it's red monotone, red and black like monotone. I guess that's technically two tones. You got Connery's face, like kind of in a black sun almost, and then you have like the mask sticking up out of like kind of a corner of the thing, and you know it's look cool, but also Crimson Tide has like kind of a very similar poster where it's all red.
It does,
and
not coincidentally.
But I got the 4K, and they've switched it to this thing. It's blue now, and it has Alec Baldwin on it.
Yep. Yeah, that guy who shot someone. He shoots someone in the submarine, and he shoots someone in real life.
There's.
I'm sorry, that's an asshole thing to say. But
oh, we'll get those jokes later on. Don't worry.
I mean, I'm not going to forget about them. But
we get a close up of Connery's playing Marco Ramius. Titles: Polyarny Inlet, north of Soviet subbase near Murmansk.
Polyarny.
Yeah. Speaking in Russian, they're speaking in Russian about like it being a cold morning. They're
actually speaking in gibberish, but
okay,
not really important.
Well, they try to limit Connery speaking Russian as much as because he doesn't do a great job at it, so they're like have him use as few words as possible.
Yeah, no, because he's doing Russian in a Scottish accent.
So Sam Neill, they're both up there. He's like Captain Borden, Sam Neill's character. So they're on the conning tower and they're talking, and it's like a giant Russian missile sub being escorted by like tugboats or something. In real life, this thing was just they cladded up a barge to look like a submarine that was like surfaced on the surface, but they made it oblate. That means like where it's flat on the top and bottom, but like curved on the sides, which is how Russian subs are made. So generally. Or at least Russian missile subs.
Let's take a book break here. This the Typhoon class submarine, which for those who don't know is called a boomer, which is a nuclear missile launching submarine. This was the response to the this was commissioned in 1974. It was a response to the Ohio class submarine, which was the most famous thing about the Ohio class submarine was the number of missiles it carried and MIRV warheads. You could literally like destroy the United Kingdom with one Ohio class submarine with MIRV warheads because it could just hit every city and everything. We had like 20 of the damn things. So the Russians made the Typhoon class, which was much larger than the Ohio class, had more missiles, but also when it was running sounded like a cement mixer with sledgehammers in it spinning around, it was very easy to track, but it was scary because it was big and it had more missiles. This is the Russian, like what I call the Russian penis analogy. It's like ours is bigger and harder and has more, but like,
it's got a bigger load.
The Ohio class can maintain a longer erection and satisfy with it, but the Typhoon class is bigger and harder. It was also a double-hulled submarine made out of titanium, not because the Russians are scientific geniuses, but because they have all the world's titanium reserves. So why not?
Well, also their metallurgy was not as good, so they had to use two hulls.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of. This was commissioned in the Brezhnev era. Like, this was commissioned the year I was born. So it was like, in the Brezhnev era, they decided the Typhoon is the reaction to the Ohio class, which is quieter than the, what did they have to make? There's a term, it was called whole and ocean sonar. So to detect the Ohio class, you couldn't look for the presence of sound, you had to look for the absence of sound. That was what the Russians had to invent. You essentially couldn't detect the Ohio class. To this day, you cannot detect the Ohio class. It's still in service. The Typhoons are done. They're not in service anymore. The Ohios are still in service. They're getting replaced now because they were introduced, like, again, the year I was born, and I'm pretty old. So they're showing their age. But yeah, so this was the reaction to that. Now, not the one portrayed in the movie, though.
Well, in the movie, they say this is
hydrodynamic quiet drive. Like, no, the Russians didn't have anything like that.
Well, even its size, they compare it to a Typhoon, but it's actually bigger in the Typhoon in sort of the story. It's bigger than a Typhoon.
It's bigger than the USS Enterprise was in World War II. That's how big this thing is. And the Typhoons are generally bigger than that, but this one's like 13 meters longer, which, you know, for our American fans would be like 32 feet longer. Roughly.
They prepare to dive, and then the kind of the Russian titles come in, and then they morph into English, and the hunt for the Red October.
Best title sequence ever in movie history, as far as I'm concerned.
Also, just a great name for a movie.
Yeah, oh yeah, The Hunt for Red October. Because if you know anything about Russian history, like number one, they didn't name their submarines after things like we did. They were always like Project 241, Plan 239. Sometimes they had names, but usually they were not. So that was purely an American thing. Like, oh, they're going to name this after the October Revolution that established the Communist Party in Russia, you know, what became the Soviet Union. But yeah, in reality, you know, these were known as Akulas in the Soviet Union.
Which basically, like, and doesn't it? I mean, that's like all the peasants rise up and kill all the
bourgeoisie,
aristocracy, right? So it's
yeah,
like,
the October Revolution. The October Revolution was with the rise of communism and the overthrow of the Russian.
Well, it's like if you compare that to like the Americans are the rich ones that don't care. It's like we're going to come to destroy them. So that's, you know, kind of like things you could pose together there. So, then we basically have like a subtitle sequence. We get a shot of like, it's like just a painting of wood ships like fighting each other. There's a bunch of books and a computer with like 3D images of a submarine. And then we pan to an angry daughter. And then it's Alec Baldwin as Jack Ryan, the first film depiction of Jack Ryan.
Yeah, and the best as far as I'm concerned. And I like Harrison Ford, but
yeah,
this was actually closer to what Jack Ryan was in the books for me.
Well, because Alec Baldwin's a smart guy, you believe him when he says smart stuff. So,
yeah.
Which not everybody can do that.
No, Alec Baldwin is the only Jack Ryan as far as I'm concerned. He's the closest to the character. I like Harrison Ford as an actor, but yeah, this was the best Jack Ryan.
Well, what's your thought on John Krasinski? Let's rate all of Jack Ryan.
I mean, John, like I said, they've John Krasinski's perfect because they've up-timed it. They've made it into a modern Jack Ryan. Like John Krasinski is the perfect modern Jack Ryan. But the original like 80s Jack Ryan, it's always going to be Alec Baldwin for me.
Okay.
When I think of Alec Baldwin, I think of Hunt for Red October. That's why when I see this fat drunk Irish guy talking about like shooting people, and it's like, I made her famous. It's like I kind of dissociate. Like, okay, yeah.
I never saw the Chris Pine movie they made that was basically wasn't based on any book. It was just the Jack Ryan characters, so I don't know anything about that.
No, it doesn't work.
And Ben Affleck's depiction is like, Ben Affleck is a smart guy, but for some reason he doesn't act well on screen being smart, so it didn't really work out.
No, he seems like a frat guy that they get. I'm sorry, Grayson. He seems like a frat guy that they gave lines to. I don't believe this guy, but
what about Chris Pine?
Yeah, I just asked about that. Did you see the movie?
I didn't like it.
Yeah, I saw the movie. It was bad. It was real bad.
I do like the Krasinski Jack Ryan as a modern Jack Ryan, as a war on terror Jack Ryan. And he's
I've only seen like half of the first season. It was okay.
Yeah, I saw the first season. I thought it was fine. I had no desire to see any of the other ones. So
I've watched them all. As soon as they come out, I watch them. I like Krasinski. I always have, because I always think of him as the character from The Office. It's like, oh, this is fun.
Except now he's wearing a gun and killing people.
And then there's
really reluctantly, and I like that.
Oh.
And then there's that Michael B. Jordan one that's based on the Tom Clancy verse that I hear is terrible. It's
God, yeah, it's not a good one, no.
I forget what it's like No Return or something like that.
Yeah, it's No Return.
Is it No Return?
I thought it was No Return. I watched it. It was, I can't remember on what now. I think it's Netflix.
Yeah, it's let's see here. Michael B. Jordan. Did I spell that all wrong? Oh, there we go. What is it? What is it? Without Remorse. He plays John Kelly, which is a Clancy character.
Yeah.
I mean, the only good scene in it was he floods his prison cell and fucking beats up a shit ton of riot officers and shit. That was pretty cool, but other than that, yeah, not a good movie.
No, I mean, for me, like, you know, as a Clancy aficionado who's read all of the books that he actually wrote, I'm not talking about the extended Clancy verse with all the weird writers, is like there's two Jack Ryans for me. There's Alec Baldwin and there's John Krasinski, and that's it. I don't, and like I said, it's hard for me to say that about Harrison Ford because I really like him. It's like,
well,
no,
I mean,
Alec Baldwin,
chronologically, Jack Ryan's story are all the characters played by accurate age people in those movies or TV shows. Because I've never seen Patriot Games or Clear and Present Danger. I've only seen Some of All Fear, seen the newer one with Chris Pine, seen the ripoff one with Michael B. Jordan, and now most of Hunt for Red October. And then obviously there's Splinter Cell and Rainbow Six and stuff like that for video game properties. So
yeah, I don't, you know, just as a purist of the novels, I like those two Jack Ryans, and that's it. Clear and Present Danger had a great, like, convoy attack scene. That's what's cool about those Suburbans getting hit with RPGs. That's the coolest part of Clear and Present Danger. Everything else was kind of overwrought.
Well, and also it's also fantasy for people. It's like, yeah, there's always drugs in Mexico. Let's send special forces down there to control it.
That's worked out well. Really stopped the drug flow into America. You can clearly see this is a success.
And we also have Gates McFadden playing his wife, which is probably her other biggest role she ever had, other than Star Trek.
Dr. Crusher's like married to Jack Ryan. Cool.
And she's British.
Was she only in the movie for like the opening scene?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was gonna say I was like I didn't see her in the ending that you're.
I mean, it's kind of like in the books too, but in the books is it's like, oh, she's a doctor and accomplished. She's not just Jack Ryan's wife. She's
like
person.
Makes more money than him.
Trying to say she's not.
Yeah, Jack Ryan's kind of a loser who reads a lot of books.
She's like an eye doctor. Or whatever, but she leaves
optician or something.
Yeah, but she leaves the UK because they have social medicine and stuff. And Tom Clancy doesn't like that, and it's like, well, their class system holds them back, and that's why she had to move to America to be a real woman. It's like, oh, is that why Tom Clancy? Okay, cool. As long as you say so.
Jack gets called away, so he's on a plane and he can't sleep, and he explains why. Although he weirdly is like being. It's a really weirdly written scene where he has to explain what turbulence is to a stewardess.
Yeah, it's strange. Oh, this is like mansplaining in the 80s.
Yeah.
I'm going to be real condescending to you because you work on aircraft, but I'm going to explain like tectonic plates and the earth cooling and heating, and it's like, okay.
Again, that like the reality of the scene that seems stupid, but it's like, oh, and to the audience, it's like, oh, this guy thinks beyond just things happening. He like kind of like gets into the details and how things works. So that's it. And it shows him like always restless, and he doesn't like, he's not an action hero.
Yeah, there's no idle time with Jack Ryan. His mind is always spinning, and he can't wait to explain to an airline, to someone who's worked in aviation for 30 years about how turbulence works.
He gets pulled into a CIA office. I assume it's supposed to be Langley, but I don't think they actually put up titles where it is. Like I don't know. I assume there's other CIA offices. I actually don't know.
There's one down the road from my house I've been taking pictures of for years.
We got James Earl Jones as Admiral Greer, who played it in the
cool.
Harrison Ford ones. Yeah, so
yeah,
reoccurring.
James Earl Jones in a movie is always cool.
Yeah,
whether it's Conan the Barbarian or this, it's like, oh, he's cool.
Or Field of Dreams, you just love to see him show up.
Or Darth Vader, whatever. It's like James Earl Jones has been a part of my life.
Was he in Sandlot? Was he like the blind neighbor in Sandlot? I can't remember.
Yeah, James Earl Jones was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that one you got me on. I don't remember that one.
Oh, I mean, that was a kid's movie, so you're probably a teenager by then. Didn't want to watch a movie about 10-year-olds playing baseball in the backyard in the 70s.
I was in my deep asshole phase by then. So something I'd watch.
They kind of go over like Jack's family. It's like, hey, how's the family? And he's like, my daughter wants us to buy a child so she can have a brother.
She's a precocious 6-year-old who's concerned about our reproductive.
Well, she thinks it's a bank transaction. So
yeah. She's way ahead of her time.
Jack has photos of a new, bigger Russian submarine with mysterious doors on it. It's kind of weird that he's bringing this to
Greer has photos.
Oh, Greer? Okay. That's why I was like weird, because I was like, Greer always knows everything. Why is Jack bringing it to him? So, okay. That makes sense. Well, no, because doesn't Jack point out the doors? He's like, I don't know what these are. So doesn't he have
Greer has the photos that he shows them to Jack, and he's like,
oh, okay.
What is this look for? A vertical launch? Why would you launch a missile vertically where the submarine would have to like stand
No, horizontally.
Horizontally, yeah.
Yeah, horizontally, yeah. And it's like, oh, you wouldn't.
Want to nuke the coast.
It'd be stupid.
The coast is toast. Then we cut to dark waters. We have a sub rolling through. It was cool how they shot, because there's always a problem for shooting submarines on movies, because like if you just put a model in like a tank, the lighting always looks wrong, because like under the ocean there's kind of like little light and everything looks blue.
A lot of people hated this movie. They said, oh, the interiors of the submarines were great, but the exteriors were awful. It's like they're in a world like they're in more like space than they are like, when you think like naval stuff, you're thinking like ships at sea above the water.
Yeah.
It's like, no, these things are down where light doesn't penetrate. Actually, if they shot the submarine scenes like they really looked, it would just be like a black screen.
Yeah.
Because that's why these people are always yelling out like, oh, it's at 300 meters and closing fast. It's like, we can't fucking see it because there's no light down here.
Put some running lights on the submarine so we can see them.
Turn on the Enterprise lights so we can see the like name of Red October with the hammer and sickle. It's like, no, dumbass, there's no light down there.
Well, they act like they're fucking only going like 100 feet down or something like that. The submarine is like fully submerged.
But the effects for this were done by ILM, and the way they achieved it is they had models and they basically filled a room with like smoke or dry ice and kind of colored it, and then just kind of filmed the ships flying through the dry ice, and it looked more realistic, even though it was still kind of dark and hard to see. But it was more realistic.
I mean, I like the submarine effects for this movie because I understand. I don't understand. I've never been on a submarine, but it's like I could imagine the only environment more dangerous. There's no environment human beings operate in more dangerous than submarines. Like the International Space Station, that is safer than a attack submarine in the U.S. Navy. Like, because in the International Space Station, if you leave a door open or something, it's like, oh, you can seal off other hatches. Like, we know from, like, Americans working with the Russian Mir station, it's like, oh, yeah, that completely, like, decompressed, and the guy walked through a room with no helmet and was fine. Try that on a submarine. It's like, no, they'll sink immediately. And the air will catch on fire and weird shit like that. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch. So yeah, like submarines are more dangerous than outer space. People don't understand that. You say that to people and they're like, "Oh, you're dumb." It's like, no, I've read a lot of books about this, and it's actually
oh yeah, everything wants to catch on fire. Everything wants to explode. Everything wants to crush you. It's
And if you leave the door open, I mean, look at the USS Thresher. It's like, oh, we didn't build the baffles high enough for like an explosive decompression to like bring the ship back up. It's like, no, it just sunk down to the bottom of the ocean. The smartest people in the world designed it. It still killed like 200 people. But it's like, no, it's not. Space is more dangerous. It's like, no, it's just in space. No one can hear you scream. But yeah.
So it's the
everyone pay attention.
It's the USS Dallas. It's a Los Angeles class attack sub, 100 miles north of Polyarny Inlet. Still
our most common to this day class of attack submarine. Very old, but still abundant.
Well, if you're gonna spend $1 billion on something, you might as well just keep it around.
Oh, those weren't $1 billion. That's the new ones. No,
okay.
The new ones are like $1 billion.
We got the lead sonar man teaching Seaman Bowman sonar. Here I don't necessarily understand because they're calling everyone Seaman. Yeah. And I thought that's like your first rank, or at least as far as I know. Again, weird with Navy ranks, so I don't know. But I think actually he's like Jones is supposed to be like a chief petty officer, which is kind of like there's like sergeant ranks or commission or non-commissioned officers. In the book, it's more
deep about the military, so it's like, yeah, fine with me, whatever you say.
Well, also like in the book, they don't explain it, but like Jonesy is like he has like a doctorate in like audio science, and he has like a bunch of like patents
MIT
and stuff.
Guy or something. Yeah.
But they don't explain that here. But
no, in the book they do.
Yeah.
Because this guy designed the software, but he's still like basically an enlisted guy.
Yeah.
Because he wants to like after his Navy career like launch into, you know, like all kinds of money working for basically the people that construct submarines, which would be General Electric at that time. Yeah. So that's. But if you're an officer, you couldn't do that. It's explained in the book. But yeah, it's why Jonesy is like a doctorate and. He's like he's like got a IQ of 170, but they don't explain it in the movie at all. In the movie, he's just like someone who likes like Paganini, you know.
Yeah, he's just an audiophile. You know, he just enjoys everything. So he's teaching. And
understand,
Beaumont's.
we're wearing better headphones now than they had back.
Yeah, he had some Sony ones that look kind of nice.
He had the MD 500 AH Studio, which actually in 1984 didn't exist, but it's an anachronism thing. I think me and Mark talked about this because Mark's an audio engineer and he knew all about that. I actually didn't know that until he explained.
Seaman Beaumont, he's teaching him. Jones is teaching him sonar. They're like, "Oh, you just found a whale." He's like, "Oh, okay." There's kind of a little story about him like playing music, but then it gets cut off because they get a contact, and it's like a missile boat coming. Oh, Polyarny. Then we cut to the Red October. It's like noisy and busy. Like all the people are running around setting things up. Ramius is just walking around observing people. And then Ramius goes to his crew quarters where the political officer's waiting for him. So you never that.
Now let's pause here. I'm going to try to stop doing this as much. But let's pause here and say the name. Oh shit! Say the name of the political officer because it's weirdly prophetic. And where is it? Ah, yes, Captain Second Rank. Ivan Yurovich Putin was the Zampolit, or political officer of the Red October. Go ahead.
So Putin's involved.
Yeah, oh yeah, just weird. It's actually a pretty common Russian surname.
Although here he's an innocent victim.
Or is he?
The political officer is like he's reading a thing. I forget what he's reading. He's reading it in Russian, and then it zooms in on his mouth, and then it switches to English, and it zooms back out. So now everything's in English for the rest of the movie. Well,
thank God.
Well, he said the transition changes on the word Armageddon because the pronunciation is a little bit different in Russian, but it's the same.
It's about the same.
Yeah, it sounds about
English
the same.
and Russian.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay,
yep.
That's cool.
Also, I thought this was the first time it happened because he also uses the same thing in 13th Warrior, but I guess he said he got this from a movie called Judgment of Nuremberg.
Okay.
They do the same thing there. So he just took it. He did the zoom in, zoom out, change to English thing. He did that exactly from that movie.
I've seen that movie. I didn't know they were related, but now that you mention it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. So we're speaking German, and they zoomed it. Okay, cool.
Because I always associate with this with being the lead, because like I figured like most movies should do this because the reason you do that is like to try to be authentic is like, well, these people should be speaking Russian, not like English accented German or whatever that you would got going on movies where you have British playing all different people. So here you give them like, okay, we're speaking Russian at first, and then we switch over so everyone can speak in their natural accent. So like, one guy can be Scottish, the other guy could be just regular British and all that stuff. So
Australian or something.
yeah. Well, I guess like
Australian, right? Yeah.
Is he? I can't remember. New Zealand. I can't remember.
Someone explain to me the difference. Okay.
Different land masses, slightly different saying and stuff, but I don't. For Americans, it's easier to confuse it, and Australian's bigger, so you just naturally go for Australian.
Yeah, because we have to fly like 20 hours on an aircraft to get there. We're never gonna know. I don't even leave my home state anymore.
Let's see here. So yeah, the thing he's reading is like talking about Armageddon, and the guy's like, a man with your responsibilities reading about the end of the world. It's like, that guy seems kind of suspicious. And then he's like, you highlighted this stuff, and so basically the guy's spying on the captain, and even the captain's like, hey, well, don't I get any privacy? It's like, well, how's that help out the collective cause if you have privacy? Anyways, he's like, I didn't underline that shit. My wife did. You fucker. And then he's like, oh, I'm sorry.
The Zampoli was real. That was a real guy that was outside of the normal chain of command, but had like a rank of like captain or whatever. That was a real thing in the Soviet system. They were basically ideology coaches that because they still believed like the revolution was real and evolving. It's very sad because it wasn't, but you know.
That'd be like the military having like democracy officers.
Yeah, it'd be weird here because we all know it's like, oh, we're actually based on Britain, so we understand irony. But, you know.
Ramius asks,
like when they show like B-52 bombers being loaded with bombs, it's like, here's a load of freedom for you. Like, we accept that. Like, yeah, okay, we know, but not in Russia in the Cold War in the Soviet Union. It's like, no, it's deadly serious. It's like, oh, you can't possibly. Yes, we are.
Ramius asks how many KGB officers are hidden aboard, and the political officer doesn't know, and he says they wouldn't tell him anyways. So there's like, multiple things working against him here. It's like the KGB's like working against him, and the PO's working against him, the political officer. So.
Well, it establishes things for later in the movie. It's oh yeah, we're completely infiltrated. We know why.
They open up the orders box, so like the political officer has a key and he has a key, which I guess these are also the missile keys as well. So
yes.
They're to rendezvous with an Alpha submarine due north, and Tupolev is the captain of the Alpha. The Alpha gets a lot more stuff in the book because it explains like it's like this, it's this very fast attack submarine that has a special nuclear reactor that's like cored by graphite, graphite moderated reactor, I believe.
Yeah.
But they don't really go through that to that here. It's just another.
I mean, the truth of the Alpha is it's what they call a lead bismuth reactor, where it uses liquefied lead as a moderator, and it's just like that's the heat exchange between that and water. And the Alphas were faster than our Mark 48 submarine or torpedoes at the time. But the problem was, if you use liquid lead as a heat transfer, you have to keep things at the temperature of liquefied lead all the time. Just freeze up and lock up the reactor. So,
the political officer wants to like broadcast the orders to the crew because like this is a new ship, so it's
yep.
And then Ramius is kind of like regretful, and then he like kills the political officer by like bashing his neck against the table and I don't know, breaking his neck and killing him.
Third vertical server.
Okay.
Third vertical
vertebrae.
Vertical vertebrae. Yeah.
Then we cut to Graving Dock number 4, U.S. Naval Shipyards. Patuxent, Maryland. How do you say that? Patuxent, Maryland. Okay.
Yeah.
Jack is watching them put together a U.S. sub. Jack meets with Skip. This is probably by Jeffrey Jones. This is the alleged pedophile.
Alleged, like I said, don't.
He's a ginger. He's a pedophile.
Is that the standard?
Most famous. Well, for me, the most famous probably in the creepy principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So
yeah.
Where he's chasing underage kids around.
I always think of him as Skip Tyler, the guy in the wheelchair at the graving yards in Patuxent, Maryland.
Well, he's not in a wheelchair. He has a cane, though, because he lost a leg from a drunk driver. That's why he's, like, building submarines rather than driving them or whatever.
Oh, okay.
I don't think
That's just his cover story. He was beat to death by somebody for being a tape with their kid in his bathing suit.
Well, and one thing this movie does get right, though, from everything I've read, from all the fiction, nonfiction, etc., is people that command submarines are the smartest people in the world.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, there's no doubt that these people are geniuses, because you're basically fighting stopwatch warfare.
And that sub they're building, that's a real sub. They let them shoot a sub being built. They didn't let them show the propellers because they said that was proprietary.
Yes.
But everything else, they let them shoot.
I can tell you a story about that if you're interested.
All right.
Or not. In the remember the TV show The Americans?
Yeah.
Okay, remember we had this supposed submarine, they call them screws. We call them propellers, but they call them screws because it's got to sound interesting and vaguely dirty because it's naval. We supposedly had this fake submarine screw that was I forget what it was. It was like super quiet or whatever, and we set up this fake company to make it or whatever. It was completely defective. It would just shatter under load. But we conned the Russians into believing it's like, oh, this is a silent screw we have, and you can you can't detect the submarine. So they immediately sent people in to steal the designs or whatever, and they made one of these propellers or whatever, and it shattered, like sunk the submarine, killed like 180 people or whatever. It's like, oh, we did it completely as a ruse. It was designed to fail under any kind of load, and we knew the Russians, couldn't come up with anything good, so they just steal our shit. And so it was a good way to kill 200 people and sink a couple $1 billion in state money.
That's a fascinating way to mislead people and make them.
Oh, we did evil shit like that all the time, especially the Soviets, because it's like, we always make the Soviets, especially like in this movie, it seems like, oh, they're super science people. They understand science at a level we don't. They have access to all these rare earth metals we don't. It's like we're barely keeping up with these guys. They're going to conquer us at any time. That was the whole conceit of like the late Cold War. It was like the Russians are just that much ahead of us, where we have to spend all this money, which was the important thing, by the way, to keep ahead of the Russians. But the reality was they were terrible at everything. They didn't have this drive system, this Caterpillar drive. No, they didn't have it. It didn't exist. I mean, if it did, we would have it. We would have wasted billions of our own taxpayer dollars to try to make this thing work that never worked. But yeah, in the Russian system, it was we always believed that they were or the propaganda was always they were one step ahead of us. But the reality was they were in the 50s and we were in the 90s.
I remember in Charlie Wilson's War, there's one of the CIA guys, his thing he'd do in the Vietnam War was like, oh, they're creating propaganda back at their bases. And so he would sell used typewriters that had C4 in them with a remote charge and wait till they took it back to the base and blow it up.
Oh, it was amazing. For anyone who wants to know why these shows exist, read all the Tom Clancy novels and then read Charlie Wilson's War, and then understand like, oh, we just got inspiration from all this stuff. Because the Soviet Union was terrible. They didn't have any technology like this. They were not ahead of us. They were way behind us. I mean, they had a lot of destructive. I mean, and don't ever get me wrong, because I know a lot of the history guys would just assault me if they ever bothered.
Well, they could build the fuck out of aircrafts, and they make the best rocket engines in the world.
Yeah, I mean, they did have some things that they could do, but they also. Well, let's just digress and let's go into some Soviet history with Nathan, because this is the part of the podcast that everyone loves. So say you were going to build this submarine. It's the best submarine in the world, and it has, let's say the Caterpillar drive was real and the Russians could make it work. But let's say they could. Okay, and then you would turn it over to guys who, electricians, welders, whatever. You got to understand, in the Soviet times, the electricians, the welders, they made the same rate of pay no matter where they were in the Soviet Union, whether they were in Moscow or they were at the other side of the Soviet Union by Japan or whatever. They all got the same amount of money. And so, there's a term, what was it called? In the Russian economy, you were better off working in the meat factory or the vodka factory than you were in the submarine factory, because it was based on what you could steal from work. Everyone, like I said, everyone got paid the same. If you were an electrician or a welder, you got paid the same no matter where you worked. So everyone wanted to work in the meat factories and the food factories and the vodka factories, because it was a lot easier to steal meat and vodka than it was a submarine.
Yeah, okay? can't eat a welding rod for lunch.
Yeah. So during the time where this would happen, you had this term. Oh, what was it called? I'm trying to find it. It wasn't like sabotage. It was like a Russian term. I think it was like Selka or something, and it meant carrier. It didn't mean like saboteur or thief. It meant the guys who carried stuff out of work. So, even if you could build the best thing in the world, like the best tank, the best submarine, whatever, it was like, oh, you didn't have the best people in those plants. You had the worst people, because all the smart electricians, they worked at the vodka plant. They worked at the meat plant. And this is during the Soviet time. I don't know what it's like now. It's probably or something like it. But it's like, yeah, you could never make stuff like this in the Soviet Union, because no matter how many geniuses contrived all this stuff, you could never make the guys actually do the work where it would matter. It's like, it was the best blueprint you've ever seen. It was the worst follow through you've ever seen. Because we didn't have any economic incentives, or not we, the Soviets didn't have any economic incentives to make it work. Because the guy who was making 300 rubles a year at the meat plant was also making 300 rubles a year at the the submarine plant. So he didn't get the best people at the submarine plant. As a matter of fact, he got the idiots at the submarine. They're the worst electricians, the worst welders, because the smart guys knew they could supplement their income at the vodka plant or the meat plant a lot better than they could at the tank plant or the submarine plant. So that's where the saying came from. It's like, oh, we have the most brilliant submarine ever put on blueprints, welded together by drunks. So it's like, yeah, none of this stuff ever worked. And it was
that the electricians sold to those guys.
Yeah. I mean, it was really simple economics, and it's always these brutal economics that make everything work in this country or around the world. It's like, yeah, this is why they lost, because they suck. Because it was like, and if you put yourself in their situation, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to act with any honor or anything else. It's like, I'm going to go where I can survive the best, which is the vodka plant or the meat plant or whatever, It's like, yeah, I'm not going to make the best tanks to defend the Rodina when I can work, which means motherland, when I can work at the, like the meat plant and bring home sausages to my family or sell them on the black market for 3 times their face value. It is just like, yeah, that's where their whole system failed. That's why I think it's fun to talk to like the local commies I know in Ann Arbor about, like, yeah, you know why the Soviet Union didn't work, right? It's like, and I explain all this stuff, and it's like, well, because the revolution didn't really get a chance. No, it's because that's always what the revolution is.
Well, that's also why Russians usually make very good computer programmers, because they spend their entire lives subverting a control system.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're terrible at it. I mean, take someone who's dealt with unemployment for 25 years. It's like, I'm always like approaching this like honest, George Washington, like, I cannot tell a lie. I cut down a cherry tree. It's like, no, if I approach this like a Russian, I would get twice as much unemployment, because I know how to work around the system, because the system isn't something in place to provide structural stability and organization. It's just corrupt, and I need to work around.
Yeah, the design system doesn't work, so you have to find workarounds. It's just why they're great at computer programming.
Which is why Americans suck at computer programming, because they're always like, no, if you follow the rules, everything works out. Which is something Americans are rapidly learning is not true.
They show off the DSRV, the rescue sub, which I think means deep sea rescue vehicle.
Yeah. Because American acronyms are incredibly creative, original.
Skip says, "How's your back?" It's a line we'll learn the backstory to later. Skip's looking at the photos. He spots the doors in the photos, and he's like, I think this is a caterpillar drive, and he explains it being like a jet engine for the water, but it'd make the missile sub like nearly silent.
Magnetohydrodynamic, which is gobbledygook that means nothing, by the way.
Yeah.
In case you're curious, listeners.
Well, it sounds like I hear magma and then like magnetic, so it's like a lava magnet. It's like, okay. Yeah. And so this basically just positions things like, oh, right, this is a first strike weapon, so this is a threat, and all the threats heightened. And it's like, okay, this, like there might be nefarious. Well, yeah, it's always nefarious, but it's like, is this thing going to go out and nuke America? Which I guess because I know the plot twist the whole time, even though the plot twist comes up almost immediately. Like, well, you're supposed to think immediately. It's like, oh, the bad Russians, they're coming to nuke America. We need to stop them. And the twist is, it's like, no, he's stealing the sub for America.
He's freeing the world to death, like we are.
And I've never been able to watch that movie kind of like with those eyes, so I don't know like how that movie would come off being like a first time, like, oh, would that be subversive or whatnot? I just kind of always know the twist. So.
Well, that and reading the facts about the missiles, they were equipped with the Typhoon class. They could launch them from their base in the USSR and hit us in America, anywhere in America. So it didn't make any sense for them to drive closer if they just wanted to nuke us anyway.
Well, it'd be less time to prepare.
Well, yes, less time to prepare, more casualties, blah blah. But still, it's just like if the threat was just nuclear, then it was always going to be just
Yeah, I mean the cynical truth about the Cold War, especially in the 70s and 80s, like any Russian preemptive attack on America would result in the literal genetic annihilation of the Russian people from the world. And, America like having a few fucked up harvest seasons and it's back to normal. It's like, that's the reality. Now, we always portrayed it like as if there was some like, oh, the Russian sneak attack would subvert our way of life and destroy capitalism or whatever. But no, the reality was like, oh, they would be dead. They would be dead 3 times over, and we would probably like end up like Brazil or something. Like wouldn't be the country we are today, but we wouldn't be like just disintegrated from the face of the earth.
Yeah, rebuild.
Yeah, build back better.
We cut to Ramius is talking with Dr. Petrov, who's played by Tim Curry. Which he does a fun job here because he basically has to play the guy who's not in the loop, but it has a lot of responsibilities.
Yeah, he's like a physician. Like he's smart, but he's not like ideologically committed to the rebellion or whatever.
Yeah. So he tells the doctor the political officer slipped on tea, and he's like, he's really sorry about this. I should have been more cleanly.
Yeah.
So they get the cook over to like witness Ramius taking the other key from the political officer,
which is just pure movie magic to establish the cook as something important later.
Yeah. But also like presumably at this time you're not supposed to know like this is supposed to be a dangerous thing because even Tim Curry's character is like, hey, you can't have both keys because the reason we do that is so no one man can launch a nuclear weapon. And then Connery's just like, well, you don't trust me? Come on.
Well, yeah, he makes some comment about like, I won't record your comments in my report later. Yeah. It's like, wait a minute. He's like, that's like basic doctrine of like the dead man switch and the 2-man option. It's like, which is well understood nuclear game theory. It's like he's not saying anything out of line. Like, he's not like, no, this is counter-revolutionary that you're.
But also like the Petrov is like, well, we got to stop this operation. He's like, this is a warship. We don't stop it just because somebody dies. Yeah. This is Russia. Come on, people die all the time.
It's silent running. You know
that. Then we cut to. Jones is trying to figure out. We're back in the Dallas, and Jones is trying to figure out what they're listening to. The computer types it up as a new Typhoon class sub because at this point the Red October is running on its traditional screws.
Yep.
Then Ramius gives a rousing speech to the crew, and saying like they're going to surprise the Americans for the glory of Russia by like popping up on the coast. doing some missile drill.
Rock and roll.
And then go to Havana, Cuba, and hang out for vacation. Then the Red October turns on its caterpillar drive, and the crew sings. The Dallas loses the signal, and they're also churning. So then they pick up that like, oh, we've been being followed this whole time. We didn't know because they were in their baffles of the screws. Yeah. And then like Sam Neill's character is like, sir, the singing, because they just like, hey, there's somebody listening to us, we should probably be silent. And he's like, let them sing.
Yeah. They're singing the Soviet national anthem.
Yeah. Apparently that was ad-libbed by Connery, but it's such a great line. It means a lot too. So I guess all the crew here is also like, apparently LA had like a big contingent at the time of like Russian immigrants, and so those were all guys that were like from Russia and spoke Russian and stuff like that. So
yeah, half of them were in the mob too.
So I have that being the end of Act 1. So we have Act 2. We get some Russian like politician opens up a letter from Ramius, and then he's shocked by what he reads, and he spills his tea.
Yeah, which is a cool scene.
Then we cut to Jack. He's getting surprised that he's getting thrown into a briefing.
Let's read that name real quick. This is Admiral Yuri Ilyich Fedorin, the political officer of the Soviet Navy.
Oh, okay.
Ramius' uncle in-law, and the one who like helped his career. So that's who he sent the letter to. Like, I'm defecting with this like really expensive submarine.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't know that yet. That's why it's like, why this guy spill his tea? What's wrong? Yeah. Well, we do know it's a note. We do know it's from Ramius, so that's all we know. It's like, oh, so because again, like that just goes forward on the idea that you're supposed to think that he's a madman about to start a nuclear war. So,
which you never believe because it's Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Uncle, and you can't do that.
Doctor, he defeated Dr. No. He's not gonna. He's here to stop nuclear war.
Yeah.
That was Dr. No. Right?
Bond, I expect you to die.
Jack is surprised that he's getting surprised, and he's getting thrown into a briefing that he didn't know was going to happen, and he's the one presenting it.
That's a great line. Like, who's giving the briefing? It's like, you are.
Again, that doesn't necessarily make sense in reality, but it's great for like just showing the character being like out of sync with stuff or just like one step off. It's like, what?
That's the brilliance of Tom Clancy, because it makes a CIA Russia expert seem like an everyman.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what if I had to present whatever to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the president's like, security advisor or whatever it is. It's like, oh, I would react that way too. It's like, yeah, that's just amazing. It's
but
it's amazing.
But also shows like how good his character is he's able to wing this off and seem like a professional because he is a professional. He knows that. So
it's what everyone wants to be.
I mean, it's like literally he's the smartest guy in the room, so this is going to work anyways.
Oh, he is. I mean, yeah. That's Tom Clancy wrote this character after himself. Tom Clancy was the smartest guy in the room. And he managed to make everyone else believe that they too were the smartest man in the room.
Well, I hear they're complaining about the Russian fleet being sent out, and they're like, "Hey, that's a lot of ships being sent out." Do they know? I'm not sure if they know if they're being sent out after the Red October at this point. They just know
they don't know. They just think like, oh, it's an exercise.
Yeah. The room thinks Ramius is going to start a nuclear war. Again, this is what you're supposed to think as the audience. But then like and then there's all this yelling, and then Ryan's just kind of talking to himself, and he's just like, "You son of a bitch!" And they're like, "What?" He's like, "He's going to defect." And like, "You're a moron."
Yeah. It's kind of believable.
And so, like, the representative wants to send Ryan out in the field to figure out what's going on to see if Ramius is going to defect to the U.S. And he's like, "I'm just a field agent."
Yeah, I'm an analyst. No, he says I'm an analyst.
Oh yeah, I'm an analyst, not a field agent. Yeah.
Which is always been the Ryan thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't know how to shoot guns or be violent.
Yeah, yeah. Jack Ryan's catchphrase is "I'm just an analyst,"
Which is also my catchphrase. I've adopted that.
Which is also like they do the exact same thing in the John Krasinski one, and then have him like, grab like 2 automatic weapons and just shoot up a whole place.
I'm an analyst, but I also have like Navy SEAL like weapons skills. And,
yeah,
and like dynamic conflict at a interpersonal level, and it's like,
well,
I'm an analyst, but I'm also like John Wick if you need me to be. And
well, for this one, they have it kind of like he was in the military, but got injured during training, so he didn't have any experience, but he did go through the training. Whereas in the new one, it's like he had way more in the field experience, and then wasn't hurt in a training accident. He was hurt in the field, like fighting and stuff like that. So that's why it's made it.
Yeah, in this movie, it's like is a helicopter crash, like screwed his spine up or something.
Yeah.
Which is how it was originally written.
Yeah. Then we cut to Grid Square 5490 SSN Kanalov Alpha class Soviet sub. Captain Tupolev command, and here we got Stellan Skarsgård as Tupolev.
Very young.
Yeah.
Can we go up to 120%?
The Alpha heads out after the Red October with old coordinates, so he's like, we're behind. But they're asking, like, what's going on? And he's like, this is kind of like, because I always, like I guess on every viewing, I always took this as the evil sub, but here it's actually, it's a bit more ambiguous. He's like, we're going to kill an old friend, and he's all sad about it. So it's a bit more, he's not just comically evil. He, like, there is, like, kind of, like a juxtaposition. There's more to this character than
this is where Raimi is established as like this like Lithuanian Yoda. It's like, oh yeah, he's known as the Vilnius Nastavnia, which means like the Vilnius schoolmaster. he's like he always teaches people through, like, he's always calm through their mistakes. And
they point out something like
Tupolov's mentor, like he was like Yoda to Captain.
Yeah. That's also something where it's like they're kind of like, I don't know, like, not the classism, racism is probably wrong too, but like that Ramius wasn't like full on Russian. He was born in Lithuania and kind of immigrated to Russia.
Yeah, his grandfather was his guardian or whatever and raised him in Russia.
Yeah. So so it's like they're kind of positioning Ramius as like, oh, he's already like kind of like not a part of the group already. He always had he's got a foot out the door for that.
Yeah, I didn't exactly call him a Jew, but
there's a crew meeting.
Oh no, that's Russia, dude. Shut up.
That's kind of everywhere. Huh?
I mean, now it's everywhere, but yeah.
There's a crew meeting. They kick out the doctor because he's not a part of the conspiracy. I like how like the like here it's not like all the officers you got, like, but you do have like the head of engineering and stuff who's always smoking, and like all you got a kind of like difference between officers and enlisted men, all part of this group, just having dinner together. So it's kind of interesting group, eclectic group. Here Ramius tells the men that he told the Soviets that they're defecting. They're like, what the hell did you just do? We can't go back now. And then he tells the story. He's like, when Cortez reached the New World, he burned his ships to
motivate his crew.
Yeah, motivate his men.
Yeah.
He also says, like, hopefully, if we get the right guy, this will all work. But if we get some buckaroo.
Buckaroo. Yeah. Like he doesn't know the word.
Which I only know the word buckaroo from Buckaroo Banzai, but what is buckaroo supposed to mean? Is that like a wild man or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, just some pistol packing American,
Okay.
I mean, in this context, yeah, it's always like the wild American cowboy, which only exists in 25% of the country, but that's become like our stereotype, like, because most Americans are like, they're either complete idiots or they're well-read, like, technicians. It's like, yeah, there's not a lot of middle ground there, but
We cut to Jack. He's taking a military plane, which I think it's like one of those radar planes or something that's going to land on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And it's the most bumpy ride he has so far, and we've already established he hates flying because of turbulence. And here's like the most turbulent. I like the pilot. He's just yelling at him like, "Hey man, this guy he like threw up all over the plane." Jack's like, "Yeah,
it was
great."
like that industrial strength puke, you know, like great shit, or I don't know what he said, but yeah.
We get titles: USS Enterprise, the North Atlantic east of Nova Scotia. We got Fred Thompson shows up as the admiral on the Enterprise.
Yes. Who's a great actor but a terrible politician, and basically played the same role.
Yeah, became a USS senator. I don't know why I said USS, just US senator.
USSR
senator.
Reichstag senator.
And then we cut to Jones on the USS Dallas. He's presenting evidence of the Red October to Captain Bart Mancuso, played by Scott Glenn.
Best actor in the movie, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I love Scott Glenn in this movie. actually played that. Like, I mean, I don't know. I've never known any submarine commanders, at least none that would admit it to me, despite all my probing questions I ask of everyone. But like this guy, like seems like the guy who would be like, oh, if I met a submarine commander, this would be the guy.
Well, I mean, it's like that's why it breaks tradition for like these kind of roles. Is like he's the captain. He's like, and it's like usually in these things, it's like, you know, you have the lower guy who like learns something, but like the higher up guy just won't listen to him for whatever reason. And here it's just completely flipped. He's like, it's like, no, you're part of my crew. I listen to my crew to make my decisions because we're all smart people here.
I like his name too. His actual name is Bartolomeo Vito Bart Mancuso. It's a very Italian name.
But yeah, it's here. It's playing. Jones is like, oh man, like this guy's never gonna believe me. And at one point, he's like, it's okay, Jones. You already sold me on it. Just tell me what's going on.
Yeah. And I like that because that's how smart people really are. They're not like so arrogant. It's like, oh no, only my ideas count. It's like, no, I'm gonna listen to the guy with the PhD from
Harvard or something.
Is it Caltech, Harvard, MIT, whatever? Yeah, I'm gonna listen to that guy.
Jones plays some weird noise, and like he said, the computer thinks it's a magma displacement, and then he speeds it up, and it clearly sounds like mechanical knocking. So that's like a cool little thing. It's like, okay.
Well, that's part of the brilliance of the writing of this script for this movie. It's like it includes you in the action.
Yeah.
Like you believe, oh, you're as smart as these guys. You're being shown this information.
And so now they have a better idea of how to look for a Red October. So right now they're the only ship out there that can basically find the Red October.
Yeah, they're it.
Yeah, because everybody else, like they're just going to trust their computer, and their computer is going to tell them it's not a sub.
Yeah, it's magma displacement.
Well, yeah, Chasso describes that like the software they're using was used to do like geological studies, and he said something about like I think it runs home to mama.
It doesn't know what it is. It says it's magma. All right, talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back.
All right. Then we cut to the Admiral and Jack debate how like they need to make the Russians think that the sub is blowing up so they can steal it.
Yeah.
Because if they know the sub is still there, it's like, hey, you stole our sub. So it's like, all right, we gotta find a way to blow up the sub, but not blow up the sub. And so that's just a plot point. We cut to the Red October. They're navigating the sub like quickly and dangerously through caverns, which they talk about here that they like had like extreme, like high detailed plots of the ground under the sea, so that they can drive as quickly as possible.
Well, yeah, that trench is mapped out really well, so they can run it the fastest possible.
Which is a real thing. It's like because like a lot of the disadvantages Russian subs have, they could make up for it, but with this high detailed maps of the floor of the ocean floor. So that was a real thing. Oh yeah. Also, if you want, you can read this Tom Clancy stuff, but if you want some real cool stories about naval stuff, read. No, I just immediately forgot the name of it. Blind Man's Bluff. It's about naval spying throughout the Cold War, and it has like a bunch of cool like stories, real life stories, crazy stuff about how they design. I remember they made these like suits that like if you hit the water they would automatically like inflate to keep you floating, and so they had like boots that would do the same thing. And this guy, he went out there, the water was so cold that the vest expanded and exploded, but the boot floaties worked fine, so the guy just drowned because his boots were floating up and he couldn't swim back up to get his head above water, and he just drowned because only the boots inflated.
Jesus Christ.
There's one thing. This is like in the 50s, and like there was two submarines that were parked next to each other, and they had to evacuate one submarine. And in order to calm the waters, they just sprayed fucking diesel fuel on top of the water to weigh it down. So
yeah, because you can't break the surface tension of the
oil.
And I'm back. Sorry, I was take a 2-minute piss. So.
Yeah. I was explaining some stuff about Blind Man's Buff is a great like nuclear or submarine espionage throughout the Cold War.
Oh yeah, that's a great book. Did you talk about the part where they had to like the undersea communications cable and how difficult that was to spy on?
No, I didn't mention that one.
Oh, okay.
I was talking about like in the 50s they made like a vest that would automatically turn into a floaty thing if you hit the water, and they also had boots that did the same thing. And then when the water was so cold, the guy hit the water, the vest exploded and deflated, and the boots still worked, and he drowned upside down in the water.
Dark story. Things that almost worked.
Yeah, it's another way you'll learn how just a submarine wants nothing more than to kill you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like I said, it's you're better off going to be an astronaut than be a submariner.
And like they had like the conning tower open and seawater is getting in, and when seawater mixes with batteries, it creates fire.
Yeah, sulfuric acid fumes. Tough to breathe.
Well, I mean, just smoking with batteries is a bad idea. So yeah.
Let's see, where was I?
I remember when Dad got mad at us for that, or mad at me for that. 'Cause we were jumping a battery and I was smoking a cigarette. He's like, that releases hydrogen gas, and it's like the worst thing ever. It can like explode and kill everyone. And I was like thinking about, oh my God, like jumping this old, 82 could become the Hindenburg. Like,
oh yeah, I forgot that's the other thing. Like when a battery catches on fire, it releases oxygen, so it creates more fire.
Yeah.
In a compressed cramp state.
So yeah, we're at the Red October where they're navigating the sub because they have the detailed plots and they can do it like really quickly and dangerously.
Yeah, they can take Red Route 1 at like they have hyper accurate like sonar surveys of the depths, and it's like, oh yeah, it's like flying through the Alps in a plane with no windows with a stopwatch.
But here the Caterpillar drive malfunctions, so they have to go back to the standard drive. So now people can find them easier because they also have like the Russian fleet is sending out all their anti-submarine planes to look for them, and they're dropping like sonar ping buoys all over the place. We got
man could walk from Greenland to Scotland without getting his feet wet. Turn.
Yeah, we got to the Russian ambassador. That's where the U.S. diplomat says that line. They're arguing why the Russians are deploying their fleet, and he's it's just an exercise.
Well, they have to admit that, like, some members of the Politburo, their sons and their sons actually were on some of these submarines we might have lost. And it's just total BS. Or did they admit that then, or is that later? I don't know. I remember.
I think it might be later. Here they're still like, here they're not admitting that they lost the sub yet. So
sorry, I'm drinking too much vodka. Reunion, so I'm together.
We got the titles: Bear Foxtrot number 692, Soviet anti-submarine aircraft south of Iceland. The crew pick up the Red October while dropping sonar buoys, and then they drop a torpedo after them. The October launch is
cool as shit, by the way. Really cool scene.
They launch the October launches countermeasure. Ramius steers the sub at like a hard turn to get the torpedo to hit a cavern wall rather than them. The crew goes really uneasy as they realize that their own people are trying to kill them. It's like, I thought this was an exercise. That was a really close exercise.
Yeah, because like an actual live torpedo detonates against the cavern wall. And mind you, they're like at minus 10 seconds on the turn.
Yeah,
they crash into that wall at any.
Yeah, he says brace for impact.
Pound collision, you know. It's like, wait a minute, we're just running into walls. Okay, cool.
And then also the chief mechanic finds sabotage on the Caterpillar drive, so they're like, KGB agents on board.
Yeah, KGB sabotaged the cryogenic plant, which is like, that just sounds like gobbledygook, but that actually means like the liquid helium has been like let out at some point. It's like, where? Everyone would be talking in squeaky voices, but I don't want to get.
Well, it's not, also first they talk about it makes it sound like the reactor is the problem, but it's like, no, it's a part of the Caterpillar drive, and so they have to shut it down. So it was weird, dual kind of thing. It's like, yeah, you can either let it be one dangerous thing or another dangerous thing. So
yeah, we can either leak helium all over the ship, or we can melt down a nuclear reactor, which, as we find out 3 years hence, is like not a problem in the Soviet.
And we come back to Jack, and Jack figures out like that they're going to fake a radiation leak to get the crew off the Red October. There's also where they figure out like, hey, we need to get me out to the USS Dallas because like they're the nearest to the Red October. And this also where he says like, well, the only way to get you out there is to take a helicopter and strip it down and turn it into a flying gas can.
Sounds safe.
So they sent Jack out to the Dallas on a helicopter, which again, it's an even bumpier ride. So this is also when Jones finds the Red October because they're back on their normal screws, and so they're chasing after him. And then we come back to the October, and Captain Boriden's like fantasizing about living in Montana and having a chubby American wife. He's going on vacation.
Have two wives.
Yeah, one for Arizona, one for Montana.
Yeah.
Drive a big truck.
Yes.
Then we come back to
Winnebago.
We come back to Dallas. They're right behind the October, and this when it suddenly pulls a crazy Ivan, which that's basically when they just, especially on missile submarines, they'll just randomly turn left or right to see if anybody's behind them. And so when they do,
the real thing we found out from what was the book?
Blind Man's Bluff.
Oh, yeah.
And they say that like, so in order to counter that, you basically just have to like stop doing anything on your boat, like not even go forward or reverse or anything, because they can all hear that. So you just have to keep floating forward and hope nothing happens. And
you might run into the quiet is what they say.
Yeah.
Just
they don't stop. They keep going. They're cruising forward rather than on power. But this is also where like Ramius at one point talks about like kind of like his regret of being in the military. He talks about like a war with no battles, no monuments, only casualties.
Yeah.
And then on the ELF, which is that extremely low frequency, or
yes.
what is okay? There's VLF, ELF. I don't know which one is deeper, or I don't know.
ELF is what they call seance, because when the people talk to you, because the frequencies are traveling through the earth and to you, because you might remember you're on the opposite end of the earth. They call those seance. Because the messages come through like it's like you're talking to spirits of the dead or something. It's very weird. I know in northern Michigan in 1991, after they spent $1 billion building these huge antenna arrays to communicate in what they call ELF to our nuclear submarines to launch missiles, at the end of the Cold War, they just ended the program because it was like, well, it's stupid. Do a satellite's a lot cheaper, but they actually had sonar, or not sonar. They actually had antenna arrays in northern Michigan, the UP, really, which I don't know if you guys know what the UP is, but it's a desolate wasteland. I've been there before. It's nothing there. And yeah, they built these massive, like multi-mile arrays, what they call, ELF, which is extremely low frequency transmissions to our submarines all over the world to launch missiles or not or whatever. And I guess they sounded like the spirits of the dead talking to them because they were very low data. It wasn't like when you send a text out on a phone, that's what you call a microburst. Microwave transmission. It's very fast. It's a lot of data. It squirts it out. ELF is very slow. So it's like you would send data out like 1, 2, F, 7, 9. It would sound very weird coming to you. I mean, it basically means launch the missiles, kill the world, whatever.
But Mancuso gets the order to surface and pick up Jack, which they're kind of pissed about. It's like, we're tracking a missile submarine.
Yeah, stupid. It would never really happen. But yeah.
So they need to They need to drop off Jack onto the sub from a helicopter, but
they need to jack off Jack on a helicopter, which creates a lot of static electricity.
Yeah, because the rotor wash, weather, it's also supposed to be stormy here, but here it's kind of just like a weird effect they put on top of the film, but it's fine. The rotor wash is also creating static electricity if they touch the submarine. So there's a guy with a pole that's supposed to basically discharge the static electricity, but he gets kind of zapped rather than getting the pole right, and so he falls down. And then they're starting to pull Jack up and abandon the try, and then Jack just releases himself in the water, which they tell him earlier, if you drop in the water, you have 4 minutes to live.
Yeah, you freeze to death because it's it's almost. The only reason that water's not ice is because all the salt in it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, it lowers the freezing temperature. Isn't that how road salt works? It doesn't melt the
snow.
Yeah,
it lowers the freezing point even
yeah.
lower.
Yeah. It eats the finish off every car I have. I have to buy new ones every 4 years, and I hate it.
But also, you see,
at least I can buy new ones every 4 years.
But Mancuso, he has that. He says, "Oh, we gotta get this guy. Put a diver in to go get him in case he falls out." So they're ready for that. So
yeah. But it's incredibly dangerous because they're going through the diver trunk on a submarine. Which, go ahead and look that up. Anyone who's listening, that's insanely dangerous.
Let's see. Then we cut to the ambassador who says Ramius is going to launch missiles. So they're like, "What? You got a madman out there?" Then Jack tells Mancuso what's going on. But the Ramius madman memo gets to him, and he's like, "Well, I can't believe what you said right now because I got this official memo out here." You need to go, or
yeah, sorry,
okay.
My legs are kind
no
of
problem.
me too.
Thanks for doing the podcast.
Oh, thanks for
having
having me.
Good seeing you, Andrew. I hope you're doing good.
Sorry, he just took his headphones off. He said, "Thanks for coming in." So.
No worries. Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah. Let's see here.
Oh no!
Intruders. So yeah. Now, even though Mancuso just thinks this guy's crazy, so he doesn't want to listen to him anyway, and he just gets this memo that just counteracts everything he says. Also, everything Jack says doesn't make sense to him. It's it's highly improbable that a guy's taking out a new ship and wants to hand over to Americans. That doesn't seem right, but
yeah, this is the most rational part of the movie. It's oh, you have to believe in unicorns and fairies. This guy is no, he's doing something good for America, who was raised in the Soviet system and was highly successful in the Soviet system, is now giving you a gift. Oh, that doesn't exist in the real world.
And then Jack trying to convince Mancuso that Ramius is defecting while they're about to fire on the Red October. Here we got the mention of full safeties and saying we don't want this fish coming back at us. So that's kind of a thing for later on.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know what the hell that was.
Well, it's interesting that because like Mancuso says that, and then he uses that trick against them later on.
Yeah.
So it's like he knows.
Again, this is bringing the proles into the like. Oh, you're part of the wisdom circle now. You know all this stuff. It's like, no, I don't.
And then Jack uses like kind of a thing here is like he always goes left. He always does a left. Did he pull any crazy Ivans? He always goes left in the bottom of the hour. Which is just a ploy by Jack to get some, if he's correct. And it's like,
which I love, by the way. I've tried this in my actual life before. Very low success rate, but it's like, yeah, it's good.
So the Dallas intentionally gives itself away by like full stop and backing up, so the Red October can definitely hear them.
We're cavitating. Look that up. I don't know what that means, but. Once I looked it up, I felt smart because I was like, I'm with this movie.
Which is a lot of interesting here because it almost seems like how Star Trek is this stuff. It's like because they know like I know it's all working by sound, but it seems like because like look, they can't see that, but they're saying like they just opened up their doors, they just flooded it, they put torpedoes in. It's like how do they know all this? It's like experience.
Yeah.
Sound, sound travels very.
Sounds like.
Yeah, sound travels very well through water. So But because you haven't done that before, it seems like how would they know that? It's like in Star Trek. It's like they just put their shields up, and it's like how do you know that? It's like they just transported a human thing here. It's like how do you know that? So again, here it's how do you know that?
There comes Dad. What's going on?
I don't know. Is something you're looking for?
You have a 27 millimeter.
Yeah, there should be something in there.
Pull the chair, Dad. Let's talk about the Hunt for Red October.
Let's see where it was. So yeah, the Dallas opens up their torpedo doors, but the October doesn't. So they both like flooded their torpedo bays, but only the Dallas opens up the doors, which they can both hear and detect. So that's supposed to mean something that the October didn't open up their doors. So both subs go to periscope depth and they start communicating with Morse code. The Red October like verifies the message with pings, and it's like, so he's like, bored and we need one ping only.
Yeah. It doesn't really mean anything to us, but it's like, oh, this is important.
Yeah. Well, I think in submarine stuff, like the ping, sending out a sonar ping is like a last ditch thing because not only do you pick up other people's location, it gives away your location, so it's not something you normally do.
Yeah, yeah, we can explain this. Like, there's something called passive sonar, and there's something called active sonar. Which active sonar is like the world most of us live in, where it's like we're actively looking for things that like indicate what other people's intentions are. But passive sonar is like, oh, we're just listening and guessing what people think. So yeah, it's important that to actively send out a signal. It's going to get you a much better return with a lot more information, but it also reveals your
location.
And because where did I learn? I'm trying to think of it. What gun nonsense I learned about why you don't turn on a flashlight on the end of your gun because it reveals your location, or a laser or anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same nonsense. It's like, oh yeah.
So yeah, then they also he sends another message that we aren't privy to what he sends, but he verifies it again with a ping. And then Jack gives them a course correction. It's like, we need to go through this abyss.
Laurentine Abyssal.
So I have that being the end of Act 2. Because Act 3 titles The Grand Banks just north of the Laurentine Abyssal 20 hours later. There's a reactor emergency aboard the Red October. They're surfacing to evacuate the boat. They placate the doctor to make it seem like following orders is like his idea. It's like, we need to evacuate the boat. It's like, no. It's like, I guess you're right. Yeah. Well, this is actually what they meant to do the whole time. There's like a U.S. Navy frigate that hails them. via Morse, or whatever the light, whatever, to hold and wait to be boarded. And Ramius is like making it look like he's bravely keeping Russian secrets out of American hands by submerging the boat after they get all the crew off, and he's gonna scuttle it.
Yeah.
Which means just blowing it up. The frigate sends. Also they fire like a shot across the bow to make it, to make sure it's like that. They're mean business. The frigate sends out a sea chopper and it drops a torpedo after the Red October. They're tracking as it's about to hit the Red October, but then Greer detonates a torpedo before it blows up the Red October, and he tells the sonar guy or weapons guy here, it's like, hey, you just blew up the Red October. That's what you're gonna say, and I was never here.
Yeah, this didn't happen, and I was never here.
Well, see, it's
like I've always wanted to say that to someone. Never happened in my life.
Also, Skip is there. He came with Greer, and they got the DSRV, so they're gonna go dock with the Red October, because that was a thing also early on when he met Skip. He's like, yeah, work on this thing. You can dock with any boat, Russian, whatever. So,
universal adapter docking plate. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can get it anywhere in the world in 24 hours. So that just so all those bases are covered. That's why we have this little sub here.
Yeah.
So they're on that sub. They dock with the Red October. Jackson there. He reluctantly takes a gun from Mancuso, which
1911-45.
Well, yeah. No, I'm just saying that that Alec Baldwin is not reluctantly taking a gun. He's all right. Now let me take.
Here comes the Alec Baldwin jokes. Hey, is this unloaded? Let's find out.
I don't want to shoot it at the wrong person. They open the hatch, and the Russians guy invite the crews back in, or invite the Americans onto the Red October. Which here they kind of cut back to. It's like, oh, they're speaking Russian again, so it's kind of back to, it's like, because that's what the reality would be. They would be speaking Russian, but
yeah.
They all get down there. There's kind of tenseness between like what's left of the Russian crew and the Americans here. And then Jack takes a cigarette from the chief engineer, despite the whole movie, multiple times, he denies cigarettes because he doesn't smoke. And here he takes a cigarette and tries to smoke it, and the Russian crew chuckles at him because he's not handling smoking very well. So,
yeah, and what is it? Captain Ramius looks at like Mancuso, and he's like, Epovny di Bakaruski or whatever. and Brian immediately texts that.
Yeah, he's like, because Ryan starts laughing, and Mancuso's like, "What's so funny?" He's like, "He seems to think you're a cowboy, Captain."
Because you have a pistol on you. Like, yeah, who would? And also, it's not really Russian.
And then Jack and Marius like kind of like debrief each other, because he's like, how'd you know we'd fake a radiation leak? And he's like, that was just a guess, but it seemed logical.
Yeah, and these people aren't speaking like to each other and coherently at this point. It's like,
But then
Ramius is like, it's like, oh, you speak Russian. It's like, yeah, it's important to know the language of your enemy. And
I don't know. I wrote Marius. Yeah, I meant Ramius.
Yeah.
Taking notes. So then Ramius hands over the Red October to Mancuso. So now they control that. But then all of a sudden they hear a Russian torpedo go by, and then the Alpha's coming after them. The range on the torpedo was set wrong, so it just goes way past them. And doesn't activate or anything. I don't think it doesn't blow up at all. I don't think. I can't remember.
No, I mean, all I remember is like it's high-speed screws. It's like the Russian torpedoes like run a lot faster than the American Mark 48.
Yeah, like Jones is down there. He's not even on headphones. He just knows what it is already because he's just the audio file of the grim. So
yeah, I don't know. Cool. Jones said cool. I'm going with him.
So a mix of our mix of Russian and American crew like man the October, which is just kind of fun. Ramius steers like has Jack. He's like giving orders to steer the sub, and so he steers them into a torpedo. And Mancuso's like, "Don't do that! Like you're gonna kill him."
into an active warhead. Like, no, don't do that. And like it's completely rational. It's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do this.
And then, but Jack trusts Ramius, so he steers the Red October into the path of the torpedo. Also, the Dallas can't fire at the Alpha because, like, hey, we're not in an active war, so we can't do anything either.
Yeah, we can't shoot at this fucking thing. So,
and so they end up hitting straight onto the torpedo, and it just bounces off the hull because the torpedo couldn't arm itself in time because they closed the distance before it armed.
Yeah, which is only something like 5 people in the world would know. Cool.
Then the KGB agent like comes in on the Ractober and fires into the con, and he kills Captain Borden, which is sad. It's like, I would have liked to seen Montana.
Yeah. I would like to have I would like to practice polygamy in Montana. And Alec Baldwin's like, I get to shoot someone.
So yeah, Ramius and Jack go after the agent. Mancuso takes command. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Something like, I forget that they're talking about like, hey, what books did you write? And he's like, I wrote this book. And he's like, oh, that was a stupid book. Your conclusions were all wrong. Admiral Halsey was a madman.
Yeah, it was about Halsey. It's like the fighting sailor. It's like, no, your conclusions were all wrong. It was an idiot. He just or not. I mean, I don't know what he said. But
yeah,
I can only base it more on the book than the movie. But yeah.
But Mancuso takes command of the Red October. Ryan goes with Ramius to stop the agent from blowing up the sub because he's going to sabotage the missiles to not necessarily set off a nuclear detonation, but just to detonate in general and just blow up the sub and scuttle it, essentially.
Yeah, he can blow up like the charges in
Yeah.
a nuclear missile, which are very destructive.
Yeah, and inside the submarine, that'll do some business.
Be careful. Not everything in here reacts well to fire.
Doesn't
like
react
that.
well to bullets.
Yeah, bullets, okay.
Also, we have.
I mean, you got to remember, it's like Sean Connery is my movie dad, so I don't know what he said. It's like, yeah, it just kind of sounds cool.
We cut to the Alpha, and the Alpha realizes that they just ran into the thing because they could close the distance. So here they take all their safeties off the torpedoes.
Yeah.
So essentially they'll blow up on impact.
Set all range safeties to 0, and screw God, and we're gonna do this. And I mean, I don't know, I can't do a Swedish accent.
Jack and Ramius are take gunfire, but Ramius gets like shot in the shoulder, and so he's out of the fight. And then he tells Jack, like, be careful, things around here don't react well to bullets.
Yeah.
And then Jack
actually they react very well because they just shut down. Yeah, go ahead.
Then Jack's like getting shot at some more, and he's like talking to himself and mimicking Sean Connery, which is funny because the reality of it, he's doing a Sean Connery Scottish impression, so it's funny. But
I love it. It's great because it's what I would do in the same situation. It's like, oh, things don't react well to bullets in here. It's like, yeah, oh shit.
But also here's the ironic line. He's like, I have to be careful what I shoot at. It's like, yes, you do, Alex. Yes, you do.
Yeah, so like Baldwin, have to be careful what you shoot at because it might be like the safety officer on the but
Rust.
Whatever, generic movie you're shooting for Netflix or
It was called Rust, I think.
Yeah. But it wasn't Hunt for Red October.
No. So the Alpha launches another torpedo. Here the Dallas jumps in front of the torpedo to draw its fire.
Yeah.
And here the guy, I forget the guy, this isn't Cobb. Well, it might be Cobb. I don't know. Somebody else is running the Dallas, and he says, all right, take us to the roof. So they do an emergency, ascension, or whatever you call that.
Emergency blow of the ballast tank.
Yeah.
With all the sexy photos of submarines you see, which are to encourage you to pay more taxes on this shit, is like, yeah, that's emergency blow. It's like,
well, yeah, which is always cool because like here's something that weighs, I don't know, God knows how, but million tons or whatever. It's flying out of the
48,000 tons, like jumping out of the sea like an orca.
Yeah.
Oh, this is cool. Yeah, just take $14,000 a year in taxes for me to make this happen, because this is what keeps America safe.
And that was a real U.S. submarine that did that. So they just filmed a real U.S. submarine doing that. So it's a real thing.
Now in the book, remember they used a almost retired World War II or maybe Korean War era submarine to be the bait for the Alpha missile.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's different in the book than the movie because the movie's way more inspiring than the book. Yeah, in the book they made like a fake submarine. It's like, oh, this is how we faked the sinking of the Alpha or the Red October.
Red October. Yeah.
But the movie we like, close the loop by like, oh no, it's the Alpha that sunk. You arrogant bastard, you killed us.
Yeah, so the Dallas releases countermeasures, and they do an emergency surface. So now the torpedo's now searching for a target. It gets back on the Red October.
Oh no, they have a line I've always wanted to say, like launch a 10-inch, evasion device. It's like I've always wanted to say that.
We come back to inside the Red October. Jack gets a drop on the agent who we figure out it's like, oh, it's the cook. He was on the sub. That's the KGB agent. So, and he's the one that witnessed the.
Which is the brilliance of John McTiernan and the writers. It's like, yeah, it's the cook. He's got 2 wires. Like he's about to cross them, and Jack Ryan's gonna just, pummel him with 7 shots from a 45 ACP.
Which this is a PG movie, so it's like a real interesting shot because you never see like bullets enter him. You just see like this wind start blowing him back. It's a really effective scene of him getting blown away by gunfire. Yeah,
it makes a 45 look like a 12 gauge. No, it doesn't really work that way, but it's cool for movies.
Yeah. So he shoots him before he can blow up the sub. Mancuso steers the Red October at the Alpha and gets them to get hit by their own torpedo they just fired, and that's where you said, like, you arrogant ass, you killed us. So.
Yeah, it's the best, Skarsgård, reaction shot I've ever seen in a movie. Including Chernobyl, the series. Craig Mazin, watch it. Great.
And then the evacuated crew sees a huge explosion on the surface of the water, and so they believe this to be the Red October. So they are basically the witnesses for the Red October being blown up.
Yeah, it's like the doctor, like what's his name, Curry?
Yeah, Tim Curry.
Yeah, he's
Dr. Petrov
throwing a salute up.
Oh yeah, like when the Dallas like breaches the water, they're like. He's like, they scared the Americans out of the water. And they're like, yeah.
All the stuff the Russians from the Soviet era wish was true, but yeah,
Then we cut to the ambassador and the politician, and he says that they sunk the Red October, but it's like too deep to go looking because it's in an abyss. And he's like, maybe someday we'll have technology to look for it. He's like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Meanwhile, like Ramius is sailing it into Port News shipyards. It's like this metallurgy we don't understand. We're going to dissect this amazing ship. It's like, oh, we've built shit 20 years more advanced. But cool. Yeah. Thank you, Ramius, for your sacrifice or whatever.
And then also here the ambassador tells them that they lost another submarine, referring to the Alpha. And he's like, oh, Dimitri, you lost another sub. And then here literally they have the character with a hat in his hand. So he's hat in hand.
Yeah, literally. Like, can you help us find this? Sure.
Then we cut to titles. Penobscot River? I don't know how to say that.
Penobscot, yeah, that's
Penobscot. North of Searsport, Maine. So under the cover of night, they hide a sub in a river because they're like, they probably won't have satellite coverage over here, so that's why they're in some river rather than just going directly to a naval base.
Which they would have, satellite coverage of because the Russians were good at stuff like that.
Jack and Ramius talk, and Ramius is wondering why he hasn't asked him like why he defected. They speak of fishing, which is something that was Ramius's like dream. Was I remember fishing with my father and kind of being, like peaceful and stuff like that. He also gives a quote that he attributes to Christopher Columbus, but just like last week's movie, it's a fake quote that they made up.
Really compelling. But
yeah.
I wish he said that, because like, our history would make sense if that was the case.
Then we cut to Jack's on a plane again, but this time he's passed out and is sleeping peacefully. And then there's a stuffed bear there as like the bear that's going to be
explain turbulence to some I'm sorry, everyone.
The bear is the brother replacement for his daughter, and also it's vaguely a reference to Die Hard, where there's also a bear in play on an airplane and a limo.
Dr. Beverly Crusher is going to get knocked up.
And that's the end of the movie. So
yeah, one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, one of the best dad movies ever made.
No matter how stupid it is, I love it because I love the book and all the implications of it. And it's like basically my whole childhood and semi-adulthood.
Well, I always love this movie. Weirdly, this time when I was watching it really analytically, I was like, you know what? This movie, in some ways, actually kind of boring. And I don't remember it being that way, but I guess I was just overanalyzing it this time. But no, it's still one of my favorite movies, especially favorite action movie. It's much more of a thinker than just random explosions, but it has great explosions when they happen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when it happens, it happens. It's great.
I mean, there's that weird scene where they use like footage of an F-14 crashing on the thing as being like, there's all this tension. It's making, and they just use stock footage of an F-14 crashing because that's what you got to do.
Like Senator Fred Thompson, like, this is going to get out of control. We're not going to be able to. I don't know what the lines are, but it's like everyone of that political stripe believed at that time and to the current day. It's like, well, it's all bullshit, but it's cool.
And so it's on this podcast. We're sending a probe into space containing a supercut of scenes from the imperfect collection that is the Verhoeven Effect movies we watch. And so we have one scene to send into space. And what scene are you sending into space, Nathan?
Buckarooski. When they come on from the DSRV from onto the Red October from the Dallas, and he sees Captain Mancuso's 45, which is the quintessential American gun, and it is. I have several, so yeah, I know it is. And it's like, that is what we want the world to understand. What we want the aliens to understand about the Sino-American, Sino-Soviet-American conflict. I'm sorry, Sino is like Chinese, but yeah.
Well, see, my favorite scene I guess one sense is the discussion with Captain Mancuso between him and Jonesy and like explaining what the drive is, and he has the tape player out. That's my scene because I just like people thinking and stuff like that, and like the boss like, no, it's okay, Jonesy, I believe you. Go on, continue on.
That's my favorite. It's like we speed this up 10 times. It's like dum 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 dum. Clearly that's mechanical. No, I mean my thing with the thing about the Buckaroo is like, this is the two civilizations grinding together right here. Yeah. It's like we don't understand each other. Like Mancuso is not a Buckaroo. He is someone, he's just carrying the standard American sidearm, which is not the most efficient or the best sidearm. It would actually be a revolver, in my opinion. But if I had to go onto a Soviet submarine in that era, I would carry a 45 because it's emblematic of America and our belief in like, maybe the best thing, the best possible weapon isn't the thing we have, but it's the thing we got to, work with. So, yeah, that's why I like it. I mean, I understand what you're saying about the, if we speed this up, we can clearly identify this. It's like we just defeated 50 years of Soviet, research into like, oh yeah, if we speed this up by a time factor of 10, it's like this is clearly a mechanical signal, but yeah.
Well, I mean,
No.
to me, that part of the movie is like the kind of like the thinking man part of the movie, where it's
Yeah,
just like,
it is.
here we're
Clearly.
figuring it out, which is like most movies don't do that at all, and so that's why I like it a lot.
Well, but later, like when Mancuso comes on from the DSRV to the Red October with the 45, it's like that's the misinterpretation of the cultures is the same. It's like it's equally as powerful, but it's a different message later in the movie. That's why I like it, because it's like, oh yeah, the Russians think we're a bunch of cowboys, but really we're not. We're just a bunch of technical savages who like, oh yeah, we understand technology better than you, and we're going to apply it this way. But we're still going to carry 45s, even though 9mm hollow points are clearly the superior weapon, as clearly demonstrated in John Wick. But
and what scene will make it in the supercut? The one I can find on YouTube.
Yeah, that's the one that'll make it.
Because last week I could not find the scene. Because you're right. The Cercle Rouge, the putting gun in the glove compartment, like nobody cut that out of the movie to put on YouTube. Weirdly enough.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I don't think anyone pays attention. I've gotten away with so much shit because no one pays attention.
So you can find us at verhoeveneffect.com or podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/Verhoeven Effect, or just
or the Joe Rogan Experience, whatever you want to believe.
You can rate our podcast. You can rate us whatever you want. The only thing the algorithm listens to is the highest rating. So remember, you control the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't control you. We have listener support at verhoeveneffect.com. You can support us on a monthly stipend of either 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect, Facebook Verhoeven Effect. You can find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory, where we can watch both this and that show live and unedited. And we also have t-shirts at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Colin.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.
Goodbye,